In last week's video titled Kamala Harris announces $1.9 billion migration fund for Central America and $0 for the black community, I briefly alluded to how Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats at large can do whatever they want to do if they really want to do it. And what I want to do today is continue building on that point by highlighting how Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and the Democrats at large were able to secure a total of $72 million in reparations payments for Holocaust survivors. Now, as I detailed in my video titled Joe Biden dismisses reparations again, so why are black Americans voting for him? Joe Biden has always been vehemently opposed to paying out reparations to the descendants of American slavery. And what I want to do right now is play a clip from that video where I read Biden's direct quote on reparations from an interview he did back in 1975. In 1975, when Joe Biden was asked about reparations, he replied this: "I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I will be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago." Now, despite the fact that the sins of his generation is Jim Crow, to which the survivors are still very much alive today and are owed reparations, I find it very interesting that Biden would be damned if he felt responsible for paying for the sins of his grandfather and father, yet had no problems paying for the sins of another country. Now, I've often referenced this article on how the U.S. government secured reparations for Holocaust survivors, but I never actually read the article to you. So let's give it a quick read so we can see how this $12 million in reparations payments came to be. Obama administration earmarks $12 million for Holocaust survivors. Funds to be distributed over 5 years. 1/4 of 130,000 U.S. victims of Nazi persecution live under poverty line. The Obama administration has awarded $12 million for assistance to Holocaust survivors. The allocation from the Department of Health and Human Services to the Jewish Federation of North America to be distributed over 5 years is part of an initiative launched in late 2013 by Vice President Joe Biden to address the needs of survivors in the United States, 1/4 of whom live below the poverty line. Well, look at good old Joe, securing reparations exclusively for Holocaust survivors, not people of color, minorities, and marginalized groups, but exclusively for Holocaust survivors. If Biden was able to do this as vice president under Barack Obama, then there is literally no excuse for why he can't secure reparations for the survivors of Jim Crow. No excuse at all whatsoever. When speaking about Jim Crow, those are the sins of Joe Biden's generation, to which reparations is owed. Now let's continue reading. Combined with matching private funds, the approximately $2.5 million per year over 5 years will support $4.1 million in programming annually for organizations that help Holocaust survivors, the JFNA said. Now, that last sentence is important because this is how the U.S. government is consistently able to bypass the entire legislative process. Just like the $1.9 billion that Kamala Harris secured for Central American countries in order for them to, and I quote, provide hope for people in the region to build safe and prosperous lives at home. This is also what you see here in the sentence where it reads, combined with matching private funds. I want you to pay attention to this pattern of how they use private funding to bypass legislation. You see, because it's private funding, it can be used however they see fit, and there's nothing the courts can do about it as far as locking the money up in litigation is concerned as you sue the government on grounds of being unconstitutional, because the money technically did not come from the government. They're just working alongside the private sector and or private donors to help facilitate the distribution of these funds. But technically, the funding is not from the U.S. government itself. Understand, if the government really wants to do something, then by hook or by crook, they will find a way to get it done. So when it comes to something as simple as the black grassroots demanding an anti-black hate crime bill in the wake of the anti-black racist Buffalo shooting, the Democrats ignoring your cries for that is their way of saying, F you, you're not getting anything because we don't respect you nor you're deceased. Now let's finish out the rest of this article, then we'll move on to Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. After Biden launched the initiative in 2013, the White House in 2014 named a special envoy to the community to coordinate volunteer activities to assist the survivors. Some 130,000 Holocaust survivors are living in the United States today, according to the U.S. government estimates. Really let this sit on your mind for a moment. Joe Biden single-handedly delivered reparations to Holocaust survivors while the remaining 3 survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre are fighting it out in court for theirs at 103 years old. How sick is that? How wicked is that? These elders are in their hundreds, not their 80s or their 90s. They're in their hundreds, and they have to be wheelchaired into court to fight for their reparations, while Biden handed Holocaust survivors reparations for an injustice that occurred in another country across the ocean. You know, I normally don't say this in the middle of a video, but please, please, please share this with your family and friends who ran to the polls to vote for Biden, and highlight this one particular point that I just made regarding the Tulsa Race Massacre survivors. And if this one point alone doesn't open their eyes to Biden and the Democrats, then honestly, nothing will at this point. Now let's jump straight into the next article titled, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton both supported reparations, just not for American slavery. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders caused a stir when he told Fusion that he does not support reparations for slavery on the grounds that such a program would be very divisive and would never pass Congress. Ta-Nehisi Coates, a National Book Award winner and writer for The Atlantic, who wrote a widely read article in 2014 making the case for reparations, was among those who took Sanders to task. Now here's the important part. 4 years ago, though, Sanders did support a form of reparations not for the descendants of African slaves and victims of injustice against African Americans, but for Holocaust survivors and the families of those who were killed. Now, mind you, Bernie Sanders, like Joe Biden, is also vehemently against reparations for the descendants of American slavery. When Sanders was running for president in 2019, this man would get visibly upset when you asked him about reparations. And every time he was asked about it, he would always respond by saying, "What do you mean by that?" How many of you all remember that? Literally every time he was asked about reparations, in an extremely condescending tone, he would ask the interviewer, "Well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?"
Your position specifically on reparations. I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want to support.
What does that mean? What do they mean? I'm not sure that anyone's very clear. What I've just said is that I think we must do everything that we can to address the massive level of disparity that exists in this country.
I'll tell you what they mean, because Elizabeth Warren has said black families have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structural changes to address that. Julian Castro has said, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that, reparations.
Well, I agree with what Elizabeth said.
So you would support reparations?
But read what she said. What does that mean? She means, I think, I don't want to put words into her mouth, is what I said.
Why not support reparations then?
Well, what do you mean by reparations?
By reparations for slave defendants.
I know, but what does that mean exactly?
Money.
But when it came to securing reparations for Holocaust survivors, now he knows exactly what reparations are. And one last thing before we continue reading. All of these so-called progressive democratic socialists like AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Ayanna Pressley think and operate the same exact way Bernie Sanders does. Don't let the progressive tag fool you. That goes for Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman too. The Vermont senator joined 18 colleagues in co-sponsoring the Holocaust Rail Justice Act, a bill to help survivors and families sue France's National Railway Company, SNCF, for reparations. A group of victims' families called the Coalition for Holocaust Rail Justice pushed for a decade to get the railway to pay because it carried tens of thousands of Jews and other prisoners from France to German camps. SNCF officials have apologized and argued that the Nazis forced the railway to do it. The Sanders-sponsored bill never came up for a vote, but in 2014, France agreed to send the U.S. State Department $60 million to be distributed to American Holocaust survivors and victims' families. After the deal was announced, Senator Chuck Schumer, one of the lead sponsors of the Holocaust Rail Justice Act, credited the bill for helping make the payments possible. Once again, the U.S. government found a way to get the money. After the original nonprofit spent a decade trying to get those reparations but failed, Bernie Sanders and the Democrats literally strong-armed that $60 million out of France. Sanders is not the only Democratic candidate who supports Holocaust reparations without supporting reparations for atrocities that happened on American soil. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was asked about slavery reparations at Fusion's Iowa Brown and Black Forum and did not give a direct answer. She argued instead for more investment in underprivileged communities, citing a proposal from the Congressional Black Caucus. Clinton, too, has a history of explicit support for Holocaust reparations. During her husband's administration, she was given an award by the World Jewish Congress for helping obtain reparations from the Swiss and German governments. Hillary Clinton and the Democrats strong-armed reparations out of the Swiss and German government. Once again, look at how the Democrats will find a way to make things happen if that's what they really want to do. Some advocates for Holocaust reparations said they felt that Clinton's contributions were overstated and that the award was political. Clinton herself played down her role in winning the payments, but was clear in her support for the payments. During her 2000 Senate campaign, Clinton was asked about the award, her position on Holocaust reparations, and whether she would endorse slavery reparations. Without answering directly, she said that we have some mental and emotional and psychological reparations to pay first. I repeat, Hillary Clinton said, we have some mental and emotional and psychological reparations to pay first. We do owe an apology to African Americans for hundreds of years of slavery, she said, but I think that people I know and the people I work with want us to stay focused on the future, keep our economy going, keep providing good public education, quality affordable health care, do the things that will enable people to have the best futures for themselves, and that's what I'm committed to doing. Translation, F you and F your reparations. And oh yeah, make sure you vote blue no matter who in the next upcoming election and every election thereafter, or else you ain't black. And with all that being said, that does it for today's video. So please make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. All social media links will be pinned in the comment section below. Please make sure you text tdhiphop to number 33222. That's tdhiphop to number 33222. That way you'll get a direct text notification whenever I release a new video, but it also serves as a protection plan for myself in case YouTube ever gives this channel the axe. I'll be able to send you a direct link to where you can find me next. And last but not least, for those of you who have a love and appreciation for the work that I put in on this channel, the #1 way you can show your support is through Patreon. For only $3 a month, that will help put me in position to take TD Hip Hop Media off of YouTube. Remember, the goal is not to grow big on YouTube, but to grow independent of YouTube. And for those who have issues with joining Patreon, you could also hit the join button that's next to the subscribe button, and that way you can become an official channel member for as little as $3 a month as well. And lastly, if you have not already, please make sure you join the emailing list. There is no way that I can go independent of YouTube if I cannot take the audience with me. And the link to that will be pinned in the comment section as well. Thank you for your time, and until the next video, peace.